Hi everyone, so happy to be here talking to you about health and well-being in the farming population. Your health is vital for everyone's future. No pressure, guys, but farmers and ranchers make up less than 2% of the population, yet you're producing over 90% of the food that we're eating, right? So it's really important for us to make sure that we are being good stewards to ourselves, and you guys are all being good stewards to yourself and taking care of your health and well-being. And today you've heard about the importance of healthy diet, about taking care of your brain, about aging gracefully, and the importance of having a good support network around you. And now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about something that impacts the behaviors and outcomes of all of those things, which is stress, right? And all of what you've heard today is something that's going to greatly impact the overall stress levels in your long-term mental health and well-being. Cognitive deficits can lead to you feeling emotionally overwhelmed, right? But on the flip side of that, if you are emotionally stressed and overwhelmed all the time, that's going to increase your risk for having cognitive problems when you're older. Nutrient-dense whole food diets, shout out peanuts, right? We know that those things are really good at reducing the risk for inflammation, depression, and anxiety are a part of that. But then also that ultra-processed foods can trigger inflammation and exacerbate mood disorders. Going back to support, we know from a recent study that was conducted in the Midwest that our Midwestern farmers who reported low support from their family and friends were much more likely to have depression. And then poor physical health, like chronic pain, illness, often drain energy that limits your daily activities, triggering stress, anxiety, and depression. So when we look at all of this stuff from the opposite direction, we also know that stress limits your ability to eat well, it limits your ability to spend time with others, and it also prevents you from taking care of yourself physically. So I know everyone in this room knows that farming is one of the most dangerous and deadliest professions in the world, right? And with that comes a lot of stress. Individuals that work in agriculture have elevated levels of stress due to occupational hazards like injuries, exposures to chemicals, pesticides. There's also financial pressures, right? The cost of inputs, taxes, regulations, things that really impact farm profitability. You also have to worry about extreme weather events, droughts, hurricanes, freezes, isolation, living, out in rural areas. You're oftentimes alone, spending a lot of time with your own thoughts. And then also behavioral health issues and excessive workloads on top of that, right? So we have what we call a stressor pileup in agricultural work, where you're not only dealing with these occupational stressors, but you're also dealing with all the other same stressors that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, right? Those social stressors, those environmental stressors. So every day, those stressors build up, and it's a little bit traumatizing when you're dealing with all those things at the same time. And so because of that, you're going to see higher rates of behavioral health issues. We do see from our research that there's higher rates of alcohol use in the farming population. There's elevated rates of anxiety and depression. And Don mentioned earlier, 3 times the rate for death by suicide within the agricultural population. So what I want you to notice, though, when you look at this first bar, is how many of these things are outside of your control, right? So much of this is external. There's not anything that you can do to control the weather or control the market from a financial standpoint. So one of the key takeaways that I want you to have from today is that, even though there's so much that is out of your control, there are things that we can focus on that you can control, right? And I know for farmers it feels like there's not a lot, but it is important because it does matter for the things that we've already discussed today. It matters for caretaking and support. It matters for aging well. And so I've traveled across the state. I've talked to over 50 farmers in the last 5 years. And I will tell you that those stressors that I just showed you are the same stressors that my farmers tell me about, right? So again, financial stressors rise to the very top, where we have problems with worrying about medical bills, cost of equipment, overhead costs, cost of inputs, taxes, low market prices. I know the American Farm Bureau survey from just a couple of months ago said that 75% of Georgia's farmers said that they couldn't afford fertilizer this season, right? So again, you know, these are external stressors, yet they're impacting the stress and well-being of farmers on a day-to-day basis. Same thing with weather. Again, not something that you control, but something that economically impacts everyone in this room and causes extreme stress. But again, I want you to look at these middle stressors that my farmers have reported: work-life balance and physical health, right? So when I've conducted these interviews, my farmers have told me that they get stressed out about not being able to spend time with their family, right? It's really hard on them to miss birthdays, to miss recitals, to miss sports events that their kids are playing in, and that causes a lot of stress. There's also a lack of time to take vacations, to take breaks, right? Or not being trusting of anybody to be able to handle the farm while they're away. And then also physical health. So, you know, chronic conditions and illnesses, worrying about, you know, their body breaking down from excessive and repetitive motions over and over again, but also worrying about if they're going to be able to, you know, continue maintaining their operation if their physical health continues to decline. These stressors, again, they're highlighted because we can decrease the risk associated with that. Stephen and Janae have already mentioned that earlier. And again, with so much that's out of your control in this occupation, labor shortages and animal mortality up here as some of the top stressors. Again, those things are outside of your control. We need to make sure that we're trying to decrease or eliminate the stressors that you do have some control over. So, here are some examples of what my farmers have told me over the last few years. And I'm not going to read all of these, but I do want to point to this very top corner one. So this was a farmer who was impacted by Hurricane Michael in 2018 and was experiencing physical and mental health symptoms post Hurricane Michael. And he started to have extreme anxiety every time he went out to try to do something about his operation post-hurricane, right? Like, it just felt overwhelming. And he eventually went to his primary care doctor. They had a conversation, and they developed a plan for treating his anxiety. And he built up a support network around him, and he's doing fine now. But it was really hard for him to take that initial step to talk to somebody about what he was feeling. And I like to point this out because, again, like, there was this decision, right, that he made in that moment. He could either self-soothe and numb or isolate, like Don mentioned in his talk earlier today, or he could lean on the people who are around him and think about the support network that he had. And so I really want to make sure that you guys, you know that there are things that you can do, and there are people that are here for you, right? I do want to go back to those stressors for a second. Got it, Don?
I was just testing you on stress.
You were.
A little stress in there.
You were. My stress levels went up just a bit. How do you think farmers cope with stressors? What are some things that farmers do to cope with stress? Hunting? Good. What else? Fishing? We got hunting and fishing. What else do we do to cope with our stress? Yeah, so religion. Good. What else?
I know some that get on a tractor because they just want to get away from it.
Yeah, taking a small break, right? So all of these things are things that we have heard from our farmers when I have talked to them about the stressors and the coping strategies that they have. But there are negative ones that come up too, right? So I know that this is a little bit of a maze, and it'll make sense after I walk you through this. So we have these two circles on the outside, and these are the coping strategies that you want to avoid, right? We have isolation, which is a coping strategies that farmers do when they feel stressed, right? They don't want to talk to anybody, they don't want to be around anybody, just get away from it all. But not in the way that Dawn just said. That's not taking a small break. When I say social isolation, this is like disappearing, not really dealing with anything and talking to anybody about how they're feeling. The other negative coping strategy that you want to avoid is self-soothing, right? So we have, within self-soothing, these are things that you do to numb yourself, distract yourself, or detach from farming, not in a good way. So alcohol and drug use is at the top of self-soothing that comes up in the research. But then also shopping and gambling. And I want you to think about how bad that is if you're stressed out financially, right? Or if you're stressed out about your physical health, and then you're doing things that are negatively impacting your physical health, but also could negatively impact your operation, right? So again, there's a negative feedback loop here when you're using these negative coping strategies, and that impacts your physical and your mental health. So we want to avoid these circles. But I'm somebody who likes to live in the positive, right? So when I go and I do this research, I love when I ask my farmers what their coping strategies are, and I hear those positive coping strategies come out, right? Because we can learn from each other, and we can talk to each other about what we need to do in order to make sure that we're improving our overall health and well-being. And so at the very top of this, we have detachment from farming, and that's what Dawn was getting at, right? So this can include taking small breaks. In fact, one of my favorite interviews that I've ever done, a farmer told me that he cuts his phone off for 15 minutes and just goes and sits in his field because he just doesn't want to be bothered. He doesn't want to have, he wants a moment of peace in his day because it's so busy. And I can attest, I've been around farmers enough to know that you guys, your phones blow up all the time. There's always a problem. There's always something to deal with. And so having just that 15 minutes on a day-to-day basis just to step away from it and think about something else has been really powerful for his day-to-day operations. This also can include having non-farming hobbies. So we had hunting and fishing was mentioned in here. Farmers also report, weightlifting, running. You're going to hear from Marshall Sewell later today from Mind Your Melon. He's a big runner, and that's one of the things that we've connected on, and it's been a great coping strategy for him in his life. Making sure you take time to plan a vacation. I know it's impossible to suggest that you plan elaborate trips, right? Because farms are busy, there's always something that needs to be done. But just taking some time with your family to talk about upcoming trips can really help elevate your mood and decrease some stress that you're having. The second one that you see here is peer support. So Dr. Beer talked about the power of having family and having those connections around you, and that's really, really important to talk to people when you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, not only for building that network for when you might need to lean on somebody, right? But also from like a cognitive standpoint, it's really good for those neural pathways and helping prevent Alzheimer's, right? You don't want to be socially isolated. You want to have that caregiving and that peer support network. Making sure you're talking to other farmers. Our farmers also talk about talking to their pastors, family members, bankers, people that they just really enjoy being around is somebody that they can open up and share those stressors with. And then finally, this third one that's on the outside, mindsets and mantras. And I have it here because it is impacted by whether or not you choose the positive or the negative coping strategies, right? Because if you're in the positive, right, if you're surrounded by people who are listening to you, they're talking about their stress, you can lean on them. If you also are taking small breaks away from the farm, you're going to be much more likely to have that positive outlook and that mindset, right? So you have something that is you can root yourself to. And that's really, really important, right? Because again, there's so much that you don't have control over, but if you can choose to focus on those positives, that's really going to be impactful for the other things that we've talked about today, right? So again, if you have these positive coping strategies, that's going to help you have a better mindset, right? If you choose those, whereas if you're choosing negative coping strategies, That's going to isolate you, and it's going to be hard to have a good outlook and to lean on the things that actually can be helpful for the future. And I do want to end with a couple of quotes from my farmers that I've talked to and go back to what I've seen in my interviews, right? So these are the positive coping strategies that farmers have told me have gotten them through really rough times, right? So again, social support at the very top, being able to talk to other people about how they're feeling, faith, right? So religion, highly, highly important. Really making sure that you know, have that support network within your religious network and then also within your family and your friends, right? And then taking small breaks. So those are something that have come over and over again in the interviews that I've conducted with farmers. And then finally, recreation and leisure. Again, you're living where you're working, so it is really important to make sure that you're taking breaks away from that area, right? It's one of the hardest, I think, occupations where you never really get to escape because you're living in it. So taking some time away, and whether it's 15 minutes to do something or whether it's having a morning where you're going out and hunting, that's actually going to improve your stress levels throughout the day while you're farming. And then, yeah, you could just see some of the quotes from the farmers. So I just usually go out there to the cow pasture and just turn the phone off, having that quiet time because my phone rings all day has been impactful for this individual. So, again, thank you so much, Dawn, for having us here. I do want to put a small plug in. We do have a booth out here where we're doing health screening, so you could come get your veggie meter score. And Dawn here has the highest score that we have ever seen on the veggie meter, ever. It's not rigged, I promise. It's insane. It's a 955, so it's off the charts. So Peanuts must be doing good things for Don and his veggie meter score. I want to quickly just say that we do also have a column that regularly runs in the Southeastern Peanut Farmer that's written by Dr. Renzi Hammond. So please check that out for like health tips and advice. And then if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them. I'll be out at our booth. All of us will be there if you want to talk to us afterwards about anything that we've talked about today.